Hi everyone, Jim here. Welcome to Mystery and Mayhem. Conan was a character that was created by Robert E. Howard and first appeared in the December 1932 issue of Weird Tales. Now, Conan enjoyed a good run. 17 stories were published in Weird Tales up until Robert E. Howard took his own life. And there was Red Nails was published posthumously after his death, and there was 4 complete stories that were left unpublished. Now, when Robert E. Howard took his own life from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, he had every reason to believe that his characters and stories would die with him. But there was many people, many faithful readers who remembered the character fondly. And in 1950, Martin Greenberg decided to reprint the Conan stories in a series of hardcovers. The first 2 books were edited by John D. Clark, and the rest were edited by a man named L. Sprague de Camp. L. Sprague de Camp recognized an opportunity when he saw one. The money was to be made in mass market paperbacks. The luxury hardbacks of known press weren't making any money. So whether he had the authority to do so or not, he began to hawk the Conan stories and his own contributions to the Conan mythology to other publishers. So Lancer Paperbacks took L. Sprague de Camp up on the opportunity, and he became the gatekeeper of the Robert E. Howard Conan stories. Whether anybody wanted him to or not. According to him, the responsibility was thrust upon him. But it could be argued that he was an opportunist, and he saw this opportunity, and he jumped on it, which worked well for him, because once the Conan series moved to Lancer, the series became very successful. And it also could be argued that it wasn't necessarily only because of the Howard stories or the L. Sprague de Camp stories in the books. It also could be attributed to the fact of the incredible Frank Frazetta covers. Now, a lot of people seem to think that the series wouldn't have been as successful without the covers. But I like to think that they worked hand in hand to make that series successful. Frank Frazetta really understood the character of Conan, unlike L. Sprague de Camp ever could. L. Sprague de Camp, for all his vaunted knowledge about the character and the stories, he really didn't get the character of Conan. But he decided to become the gatekeeper of the character, and he started to instill his own stories into the mythology, which he had started to do in the Gnome Press books. But what he would do is he would take a lot of the non-Conan, the Robert E. Howard non-Conan stories, and rewrite them into Conan stories to fill up these apparent gaps in the chronology that he had to fill. So he did that, which is heinous enough. So that still wasn't enough to fill up the gaps that he felt the Conan stories had. So he started writing his own Conan stories, and he hired Lynn Carter to write some stories, and a man named Bjorn Nyberg, who wrote The Return of Conan, a pastiche that was published as Conan the Avenger. And as pastiches go, that one was actually pretty good. But even that story, L. Sprague de Camp had to get his heavy-handed editing techniques into that story as well. And this is what he did. Even with the Robert E. Howard stories, he would use his heavy-handed editing techniques and change many things, dates. He took out certain things that he thought might not read for a modern audience. He changed a lot of things, and probably the most heinous one he did was he took Robert E. Howard's story, The Black Stranger, which at that point had never been published, and he basically rewrote it and called it The Treasure of Tranikos to fill a chronological need. And he not only rewrote it once, but he rewrote it twice, 2 or 3 times. There was a shorter story that appeared in the Lancer and Ace books, but there was also he expanded on it and made it a longer novel that was published by Bantam Books later, and you'll see that up here. I might feature them later on, but and at that point, Howard's story had never been published, and so all we knew of as readers of Howard's story was this mutated L. Sprague de Camp story called The Treasure of Tranicos, and reading. I enjoyed these at the time, and it's not that the Lynn Carter stories and the L. Sprague de Camp stories don't have any merit, because some of them do. They're enjoyable. They're just not Conan stories. As a matter of fact, Lynn Carter infamously took some of his Thongor stories and rewrote them into Conan stories, which is a little ironic because Thongor is kind of a copy of Conan anyway. So Lynn Carter, when he wrote Thongor, was copying Robert E. Howard anyway. So you could say that they were Conan stories, but they weren't as good as the Robert E. Howard stories. And even as a kid, reading these Ace paperbacks, which I read many times, you could always tell that the better stories were the Robert E. Howard written stories, even though L. Sprague de Camp had his hand in them. So I'm going to go through some of these. Actually, if you want to know more about the story, I just went through the Gnome and Lancer Ace really quick, their story, but I picked up this book quite a while back called The Conan Companion. And this delves deeply into the history of Gnome Press, Lancer Books, and the Ace paperbacks, and also talks about the UK Sphere books, and the later Tor books. And this is actually a very, very informative book, even though the writer is a little biased towards Howard and against L. Sprague de Camp. It's not really an objective look at the publishing history, which I can forgive him, because L. Sprague de Camp is a very divisive personality, and he's not really looked too well upon these days because of what he did to Robert E. Howard in his stories. And he also wrote this biography of Robert E. Howard called Dark Valley Destiny, and this is full of just egregious things about Robert E. Howard. Like if there's a worst example of armchair psychiatry, this is it. I mean, he made all kinds of accusations about Robert E. Howard's sexuality and his life in general, and not a very well looked upon book. But I mean, it's interesting to read if you're interested in the history of Robert E. Howard and Conan. It gets into a lot of details. I mean, when it's not making accusations, these awful accusations that are totally untrue. I mean, there are some interesting things in here that you might find interesting to read. But yeah, so I'm going to go through the books and show you the books. First, I'll show you the Lancer books that I have. Now, the numbering on this is odd. Like the first, like if you look at the Ace books, the first book in the series chronologically is Conan. But you'll notice on this particular copy, it's volume 5. And this copy of Conan the Adventurer is, where does it say it? Volume 1. So that numbering system was changed later on to match the Ace paperbacks that came later on, and they were more in chronological order. But I mean, this numbering is odd to me, and I really don't know why it was done that way, because they were trying to print it in chronological order. But that's something I'm going to have to look more into and find out more about why that was done. But still, they are beautiful books, and these featured the Frank Frazetta covers like beautifully. That's an iconic picture of Conan right there. Conan the Adventurer, Conan the Usurper, and here I've got 2 other copies of Conan. Now these are listed, labeled as Volume 1, which is how the Ace paperbacks have them in order. Conan is Volume 1 chronologically in the series. And here we have Conan the Buccaneer by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, with nary Robert E. Howard word to be had in this book. And I can't really recommend this. It's very minimal effort, but as a completist, you might want this in your collection, and of course for that awesome Frank Frazetta cover. And these are Lancers again, but this is when they started to do the numbering correctly to match the Ace paperbacks. And there is Conan, and that is number 1. And here we have that beautiful cover, number 2, Conan of Cimmerian number 2. This is probably the first prose Conan I had ever read, was Conan of Cimmeria, but it was in the Ace paperbacks. But yeah, very, very good book. You know, I mean, if you can get past the fact that you know, L. Sprague de Camp's emendations and editorial and everything that he did to them. Now these covers are by an artist called John Duo. I'm not too sure how to pronounce his name, but yeah, the early Lancer paperbacks didn't have the Boris covers, so that's Conan the Freebooter. And these covers aren't bad, actually. They're not bad at all. It's just, I mean, he couldn't really compare to the Frank Frazetta covers, so they kind of fell by the wayside and weren't really that popular. They didn't really make the effect on the cultural landscape like the Frank Frazetta covers did. So that's Conan the Wanderer. And last in my Lancer series is Conan the Avenger. Now this is reprinting The Return of Conan, written by Bjorn Nyberg, and again edited by L. Sprague de Camp. He put his heavy hand in. I think it had to be translated too, so probably very different from the initial concept that Bjorn Nyberg had. But still, as pastiches go, this one is pretty good. I did enjoy this one a lot. So now I'm going to show you the Ace paperbacks. We'll go through them real quick. Yeah, and you've seen them before. I mean, there's so many people who do Conan videos on here, and you're probably getting sick of seeing Conan, but it is Cimmerian September, and I am such a Conan fan. I have been all my life, Robert E. Howard fan, and you know, I had to put my 2 cents in here. So these are the Ace paperbacks, and there's 12 in the series, and there is Conan, volume number 1, again with that painting from Rogues in the House, the story Rogues in the House by Frank Frazetta. Beautifully done by Frazetta. Number 2 again, Conan of Cimmeria. Now these were, the Ace paperbacks came out, I think it was 1978, about the same time that the Berkeley Medallion books came out, and those books tried to present Howard in a pure form, without the editorial emendations and no pastiches. And Carl Edward Wagner managed to publish 3 of those. And to this day, I wish they had been able to publish the complete Conan, Robert E. Howard Conan stories in that series, but unfortunately they didn't. And it was up to Del Rey years later to do that. And so all we had for the longest time were these Ace paperbacks with that were polluted by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. But that's Conan the Freebooter, Conan the Wanderer. Now Boris, he's no Frazetta, but he does a good job on these. There's Conan the Adventurer, probably one of my favorite Conan covers of all time, paintings of all time. That just conveys everything, everything about Conan. It just got the spirit, the atmosphere, the drive that Conan had. It's just like so brutal and epic. Such a great cover. And here we have Conan the Buccaneer. Again, you know, a complete novel by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. And not the greatest. You know, they really didn't understand Conan at all. You know, and he was the gatekeeper of the character for years. Conan the Warrior. And that one has all Robert E. Howard stories in it. Red Nails, Jewels of Gwalior, and Beyond the Black River. Again, edited by L. Sprague de Camp. So, God knows what he did. I mean, if I really wanted to research it, I could look at the Del Rey books, and they go into in depth as to what the pure Robert E. Howard text is. So, I mean, if I wanted to go through them word by word and compare, I could see what damage was done to these stories by L. Sprague de Camp. But, you know, nobody's got time for that. And here is, some of these aren't the greatest shape. There's a bend in this cover. I've got Conan the Usurper. Now here's Robert E. Howard's only full-length Conan novel, The Hour of the Dragon, and it was retitled in this Conan the Conqueror. The Hour of the Dragon was published by Berkeley Medallion in its purest form, so I prefer that version over this version, but still, this is nice to have, and it's got that wonderful Rosetta cover, and that's Conan the Conqueror. And we have Conan the Avenger, again, Bjorn Nyberg. Now, these next two are no Robert E. Howard to be found in the next two. Number 11, Conan of Aquilonia by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, introducing young Prince Khan there. And probably the baddie in that was Thoth-Amon through these stories, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I read these. The Witch of the Mists, Black Sphinx of Nebthu, Red Moon of Zimbabwe, and Shadows in the Skull. So, and these paperbacks, I had a lot more of these full cover and back cover paperbacks, but I sold some of them. But this is pretty much the only one I have left. But not really. I mean, the stories aren't bad, but they're not Conan. And here we have the last, number 12, in this Ace series, Conan of the Isles by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter. Again, that's a 20 chapter full length novel. So yeah, I mean, my impression, even as a kid, when I would read the introductions to these Ace paperbacks, and L. Sprague de Camp would have an introduction in each one, and for all his vaunted, you know, he would go on and on about how brilliant Robert E. Howard was, and, you know, great character, and he was a natural storyteller, but there was always a little passive-aggressive condescension in each introduction, and I even caught that as a kid. Even just calling Robert E. Howard a natural storyteller was a little bit of a jibe at him, like, you know, he really wasn't professional. And anyway, it didn't sit well with me. So I don't want to call myself a Robert E. Howard purist, but I basically am a Robert E. Howard purist. I much prefer reading the pure Robert E. Howard words as opposed to what L. Sprague de Camp did in these, you know, 12-issue series. And I recommend, you know, if you do want to read these, I recommend that you actually read the Del Rey books first before you read these. You know, you can get the Robert E. Howard stories out of the way. And honestly, when these were printed, the Lancer and the Ace paperbacks, what they should have done was just print all the Robert E. Howard stories. And just print them, get them done, have a nice volumes of the Robert E. Howard Conan stories with minimal edits. And then if they wanted to carry on with the series, they could have done that. But instead, he just had to interject, you know, everything, you know, between the Robert E. Howard stories and do it chronologically, which makes no sense because it just seems fragmented at that point, because you're putting similar stories up against one another, whereas Robert E. Howard never intended that. You know, he did early stories and later stories, and it just didn't work. but L. Sprague de Camp tried to make it work, and it was successful. You know, they were a very successful series of paperbacks, and you know, I often wish that Robert E. Howard could have lived to see the success of his character, and you know, and enjoy the fame and the fortune that it would have brought him. You know, I often compare Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs. Edgar Rice Burroughs lived to enjoy all that fame and that celebrity and all the money that it brought in and the success. But Robert E. Howard, as I said, he died believing that his characters and stories would die with him, which is unfortunate. And I think I'll leave it at that for now. This is a video I've been trying to do for a long time. Like an in-depth Conan video, and I still haven't really done it to my own satisfaction. I still want to do a proper Robert E. Howard and Conan video, but I mean, he's a person and a writer that's so personal to me that I'm finding it very difficult. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and yeah, I want to celebrate in Cimmerian September, which Michael K. Vaughan created over on his channel, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So I will talk to you very soon, and you guys take care. Keep reading.